My name's Brian, recovered alcoholic. Welcome everyone to the Big Book Experience. And my sobriety date is February 2nd, 1997. For that, I'm very grateful. Let's open this workshop with a moment of silence for the still sick and suffering alcoholic that may be in the rooms, sober, suffering. Let's take a moment and think about that person. That person might be a family member, might be a friend, might be someone you just know at meeting. Let's take a moment and think about them, and then we're going to follow it with the set-aside prayer. Okay, the set-aside prayer. God, please help me set aside everything I think I know about myself, about the big book, about my disease, and about other spiritual conceptions, so I may have an open mind and a new experience with all these things. Please help me see the truth. Amen. And that's really what we're doing here. What we've been doing is basically, I like to think of me as I'm pulling out this magnifying glass that now I'm not going to ever lose again. But hopefully that I take out the magnifying glass and I helped all of you to see your truth, because that's kind of what I do as a sponsor, is just to help my sponsees see their truth, the truth about the stock in trade, like it talks about on page, when it's at 64, to discover, I think is what it said, a fact-finding and fact-facing process, fact-finding, that we were in the ego state of being, that I didn't even know it, fact-facing, you know, to me, that was just a huge revelation for me, was to realize I'd been living a certain way and I didn't even know it. And not only that, but I didn't, if you told me I was living that way, I would have fight you to the death to prove that you're wrong, that I didn't live that way. I hope you're all understanding what I'm talking about here. This, because I never ever thought that I had an ego problem. I always thought, well, I'm humble, you know, I don't have an ego problem. But when I went into this third column and expanded, oh my God, I realized I'd been living this way for so long. I've been living this way and didn't know it. And the other thing is that I show the whole world that I am angry when my inside, I'm just afraid. And I figured that out, even just doing the fears in the third column. I figured that out, that I'm showing the whole world that I'm angry. And really inside, I'm scared of everything and everyone. You know, you think about those, what is it, the 9-step promises, where it talks about fear of people. And it's two things: fear of people. Man, I was afraid of everything and everyone, because everybody's out to get me. You see? That's really coming from that ego state. I really think that, you know I really feel the longer that I'm sober is that my ego is just always out to get me. Cunning, baffling, and powerful, it's just waiting for that moment to get in there and just sort of create drama. The ego, in order for the ego to live and prosper, it needs it needs your body to do its bidding. You see, in the back of all these characters that we had talked about in step 3 and step 4 and in resentments, right? In the back of those characters, there's that ego controlling everything. I want you to really understand that the ego needs your body to do its bidding, because we made a decision in step 3 that we weren't going to do that. We were going to let something else, some kind of other power that you came to believe in we agnostics, that power is what you're going to, in a sense, serve, because you can no longer serve the ego. And I hope you all, understood that when we went through that third column, because to me, it just blew it all the way. It just blew it, completely. Like, to me, it was lots of realizations was going on for me. And so I hope that was happening with all of you that have done this, that you just keep having these realizations. Write them down. I can't tell you the value of just writing anything down, the value of writing it down. I don't know about any of you, but I suffer from CRS, can't remember stuff. Now, some people change that last word to something else, okay? But I just had it happen today, where I walked into the kitchen and I was like on a mission. I was looking for something specifically. And as soon as I walked into the kitchen, I completely forgot. 100%. I couldn't remember. I even walked in back into the other room to see if I could remember. Like maybe my thought was left in the other room or something. And I just couldn't remember. And I was like, well, that's gone. And I thought, man, I should start writing more things down, even though I have stickums everywhere and I write stuff down. But here's the thing, I got this built in forgetter. I got to write things down all the time, especially, if you're getting inspired, you know, just write them down. And so, anyway, I want to, I wanted to touch a little bit on that, on what we had done so far, you know, uh, and we ended at the bottom, 67. And so, I wanted to talk a little bit about that ego and about that, the roles that we played. And I basically just kind of want to wrap all that up, you know. Um, Always keep in mind that it's like a stage play. I'm in the stage. I'm in the show. Remember, I talked a lot about the show in step 3, the stage character. I play all these different roles. Again, behind all that is the ego controlling it all. Now, if I have this power that I tap into, what we talked about in step 3, where it talked about the arch to freedom and all these beautiful things. So when I tap into this power, right, and I'm living more of a spiritual, I'm on the spiritual path. The ego is still there, but he has a hard time trying to use me because I'm serving someone else. I hope that makes sense. If I'm serving some other power, the ego can't use me. So the ego just goes back into the shadows. So when the ego comes is sort of when I am not spiritually fit because I'm not, I am undisciplined. And so when I'm not spiritually fit, man, the ego just comes right in there and just takes over. And before I know it, I got all kinds of drama going on in my life. And I'm like, what happened? And then the first thing I need to do is reconnect. I got to go sit quietly and reconnect with that power so the ego just doesn't take over. You know, you know, when we were going over resentments, you know, it talked on the bottom of page 66. It said fancied or real. And I just wanted to touch upon that for a second. And I probably should have done it last week, but I wanted to touch upon it because fancied is that I can make shit up in my own head that's not even true. And then I'll even believe it. That somebody did something to me that I will create in my own mind a resentment that is based on nothing, based on that delusional state that I can make stuff up about people. That's not even true, that I will believe it to be true. And here's the thing. I had somebody about 3 years ago, was in my home group. He got a resentment towards me. Now, he just kind of gave me like this cold shoulder for like a year until one day I pulled him aside and said, dude, what's wrong? And he goes, I have a resentment towards you. And I've had it for a year. And guess what? I didn't even know about it. I didn't even know about it. Most of the time, the people that you have resentments towards, they don't even know that you have a resentment towards them. And if you think that people are going around purposely causing you to resent them, that doesn't happen. That's the ego. That just doesn't happen. People are not going around doing that, you know? So I have that, I went back and I just, I wrote a little question on there, about fancied or real. The wrongdoings of others, fancied or real, has the power to kill in that column too, right? Fancied or real, because I can make stuff up in my own mind and then believe it. That's that fancied, you know? In the light of the information coming from your answers in that third column, reflect once again on the real role. I had all these roles that I had played in that third column. They all started with self-esteem, and I wrote a couple of down. But it's asking me again to reflect once again on my real role in contrast to the roles you identified coming out of column 3. So I'm going into that fourth column again one last time, and I'm trying to find my real role in all of that. Kind of like what we did at the end when we found that ultimate fear at the bottom that was driving it all. Now, what's the ultimate role? Take it a little bit step further and have a different experience. So I take whatever I figure out what that ultimate role was, and I'm going to write that at the top of the my column 4 sheet, where I have my name. I'm just going to put that ultimate role that I had played. Now, your real role is usually the direct opposite of the perceived role coming out of step 3. coming out of column 3. So the roles that I had put in the top of that column 3 by self-esteem, the real roles that are coming out, the real role that comes out of that is usually the opposite of all of those. Again, I like to do stuff for new experiences, you know? All right, from this, um, I'm not gonna, I think what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna stop here and we'll go into fears. And because I was gonna do step 5 for resentments, but I think it's better if I just do all the step 5 like a meeting, and we're just gonna do all resentments, fears, and just from this moment on, we'll just do all the inventory, do all the writing, and then we'll have another meeting where I'll do actually step 5 and maybe take a participant in here and show somebody how I would take someone through that. And I'll have it all recorded. I think that's so important. It's probably the most important thing I can ever do as a sponsor is have a sponsee sit in with me when I am doing a fifth step with somebody or a fourth step with somebody. Have a sponsee sit in with me, or someone that's a sponsor that's already sponsoring people. Have them sit in with me too. Because here's the thing, I can learn from you and you can learn from me. So we learn from each other. As long as I keep an open mind, I can learn from anybody. It doesn't matter how long, because you got experiences. Your experiences might be different than mine, you know? I'm going to start where we left off at the bottom of page 67. It says, notice the word fear. Now, I want to tell you is that we kind of jump started this. So a lot of this we're already ahead of the game here. It says, notice the word fear bracket alongside the difficulties with Mr. Brown. Now, above difficulties, I just wrote internal difficulties because that's what it is. It's my internal difficulties that's coming out of that third column. And they all stem from the selfishness, self-centered, which is the ego. Uh, Mr. Brown, Miss Jones, the employer, and the wife. This short word, we're talking about the word fear, somehow touches about every aspect of our lives. Now I'm going to stop here and I'm just going to ask a question. I just want to see if I like to look at people too. So the question I'm going to ask is, has this from you doing that inventory process that we did with the third column and the fourth column, can you see how that short word feared touched every aspect of your life? That's the only way that I can do such an inventory like that to get to this point where I can see that it touched every aspect of my life is by doing that third column the way that we did it and coming up with all those fears for each resentment. And then going into that fourth column and seeing what that main fear was that's driving everything. It says it was an evil and corroding thread. The fabric of our existence was shot through with it. It set in motion trains of circumstances which brought us misfortune we felt we didn't deserve. I hope you're all kind of really feeling these words after the inventory that we just did. You have to understand that's why we do fear inventory right after resentment. I mean, right after, because it just makes sense that it's right after because we're going to have all these lists of fears. The next line we have is a question. I highlighted it in purple, and it said, but did not we ourselves set the ball rolling? And what I wrote after that is from the ego state of living. And the question, I want you to answer that question. Did not you or we ourselves set the ball rolling from being in that ego state? Can you see where you started the ball rolling in the fear from the ego state? I come to this question and I have to answer it yes. After going through the inventory that we just did, I can see where I started a lot of it. It says sometimes we think fear ought to be classed with stealing, seems to cause more trouble. It causes more trouble. Now we got the directions that we got to do. So this is what I want you to do here. Let's see if I have a piece of paper. Okay. I want you to take out a sheet of paper like this. And I'm going to draw it up right now. I don't want you to do anything just yet. I'm going to show you what I want you to do. Basically, all I'm doing right now is I'm just drawing lines. I want to see how many I'm going to come up with. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So draw 8 columns, straight up and down. Doesn't have to be pretty. I even went off the page, ripped the page and everything. My lines are definitely not straight. You don't need a ruler, just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines. I used the margin on one of mine, so I only had to draw 8 lines. Again, we're just going to make a sheet just like that, 8 columns. Once everybody's done with that, just kind of give me a thumbs up. I got it so I can see if people got their cameras on. That way I can, because I don't want to lose anybody. Okay, we're good. Sean, you good? Everybody else I can't see because nobody else got their cameras on. So, all right. It says here, see where'd I go? What did I do? Went to the wrong page. Oh, yeah, I was on the right page. It says reviewed our fears thoroughly. We put them on paper. That's why I had you do that paper, right? I'm going to tell you what to write, but just not yet. It says even though we had no resentment in connection with them, we ask ourselves why we had them. So in that first column, right, we got 8 columns. So column 1 is going to be whatever that column is closest to the left-hand side. We're going to start. We'll make that column 1, and I want you to make a list of all your fears. All right. Now I want you to skip, maybe a line or two. You don't really need that much space. A line or two after each one. We'll just skip one line after each one. That makes it easier. And then just write your fears. Now, as you're writing your fears, I have a list of all the fears here, and I'm just going to read through them as you're writing them. All right? Fear of God, fear of dying, fear of insanity, rejection, loneliness, drinking or using, fear of relapse, fear of authority, heights, fear of losing somebody, fear of police, jail, doctors, fear of being found out, fear of success, fear of failure, fear of drowning, fear of poverty, fear of the unknown, fear of confrontation, fear of guns, fear of change, fear fear of physical pain, fear of responsibility. That should kind of give you some, kind of get you going. So what we're going to do is, that's all you're doing right now, is just making a list in column 1 of all your fears. Now, just first off, we're just going to do the list of fears that we don't have any resentment in connection with them. And then once we're done with that, then I'm going to have you add the fears that you did in your 3rd column and the fears that came up in the 4th column of resentment. That way you'll have a complete list of all your fears. That's why it first says, even though we had no resentment in connection with them. So that's what we're doing first. We're first doing the fears that don't have any connection to resentment, And to me, that could be something like, like a fear of a rattlesnake. I'm just using that one as an example, or a fear of a tarantula or something, because they don't have resentments in connection with them, We're going to take another minute or so to finish that up. And then I want you to add all the fears from resentments. So you should have a pretty good list there. Now, again, if you run out of paper, just make another sheet of paper, make 8 more lines, and then all you're doing, we're just doing fear in column 1. That's all we're going to do. Make a list. Okay, how's everybody doing column 1? Sean's done. So we're going to put a heading for all the rest of the columns. And the heading is going to be the same. And the heading is going to be, why do I have this fear? and I want you to list it. So you got column 1 is already a column. It's going to be a list of fears. Now column 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. It's all going to have the same heading, and you're just going to put, why do I have this fear? 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 Because that's what it's asking us. We ask ourselves why we had them. So first off, you know, I came up with a list from my resentments, and I came up with 11 fears off of my resentment inventory. Of course, I only had 2 resentments that I had in there, but I came off with 11 fears. So 2 people I resent for that, and I showed the whole world that I'm angry, and I came up with 11 fears, which showed that I'm showing the whole world that I'm angry, and the inside, I'm afraid. My insides are not matching the outside. Emotional sobriety is when we're unaffected by what's going on the outside, on the inside. Because they always say recovery is an inside job. So when I finally get that peace and serenity on the inside, right, no matter what's going on in my life, I can still stay calm and serene. I hope that makes sense to y'all. We're actually going to talk about this here in a few minutes. Okay, so again, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh column is all going to be, why do I have this fear? Did everybody finish with column 1? I'm going to suspect that everybody got more fears than they had resentments. Like probably by times, times 5 or 10 or something like that. And that's good. That's a good thing, because I know for me, when I started really finding these fears in that third column, man, these just were like pulling at my heartstrings. I was just like, wow, these are so just, yeah. Again, you don't have to worry about trying to think of everything. There's only one step that you got to do perfectly. There's only one step that you got to do perfectly, and that's step 1. So if you can't remember something, like, it's okay. We don't have to sit here and spend 3 hours trying to think and think and think, It's okay. Whatever's on your mind, that's what you're going to write about. It's a spiritual program, not a mental one. I just let it just kind of flow. And the good thing is that when we're all done and something comes up, you're going to know exactly what to do with it. So I want you to we're going to go into the second column here. I want you to take one specific fear from that list, and I want you to describe in that second column the reasons why you have that fear. What are you really afraid of? So that's what we're going to do. It's called it's called the trail of fears. And when you keep asking yourself, what are you afraid of? So if you go something like, let me give you a couple examples, you know, it's like, I'll give you, like, I have one that says, I'm afraid of not being good enough. All right. And why do I fear not being good enough? It's because I'm afraid of being unwanted. And why do I have the fear of being unwanted? Because I have a fear of being alone. And why do I have the fear of being alone? Because when I'm alone, I'm in emotional pain because I'm lonely. And why do I have that fear of being alone and being in emotional pain? Because when I'm in emotional pain and I'm lonely, I want to drink. And then I have the fear of drinking because if I drink, I'll die. So then I'm afraid of dying. You follow how you see, you kind of get the idea there. So what I want to do here is after each region, ask, why is this so? After each reason that you write down, push it until you can't go any further. Try to identify the core fear, the source of all your fears. Let it flow. I'll give you an example. I'm undesirable. Okay, that's like a rejection. So when I get rejection, I feel undesirable. No one will want me or love me. I'll be alone, in pain. I'll drink. I'll die. There is no afterlife, and there is no God. You see how that fear just kind of ran through these fears, all just like that, from just getting rejected? Think about it. You get rejected. I know for me, I get rejected. The first thing I'm going to feel is that I'm not desirable, right? And then no one will want me or love me. I'll be all alone. I'm in pain. I'll drink. I'm going to die. If I drink, I'm going to die, right? And then there is no afterlife and there is no God. You see, I want you to do this for each fear. Look through each description to identify the essence or basic reason for the fear and distill it down to the core fears. Where, for example, you might have 80 fears, and then you're going to bring it down to 40. And then from 40, you might go to 20, and then from 20 to 10. And then you might either bring it all the way down to 1 or 2, or you might have 5 or 6 when you're all done, versus starting out with 100. Okay. So you're going to do this fear analysis process until you reduced it to several core fears. They could be positive or negative fears. And that this is going to take a little bit of time. I'm going to give you an idea. I'm going to give you like something to write down here, and then you can just follow the same path, because the same path is always going to lead to the same thing. So uh, the path is going to be I'm not good enough. So if you just want to write these words down, it'll be not good enough. And basically, I'm just writing them they're in columns. So not good enough. I'm afraid that I'm not good enough. Why do I have the fear? Because I feel unwanted, and then alone, emotional pain, drinking, dying, and then I'm afraid of dying because I'm afraid of the unknown. And I'm afraid of the unknown because I fear that there is no God. I fear that there is no God because self-reliance failed me. There's always, that's going to be the last one at the end, is self-reliance failed me. So when you kind of write it like that, and you kind of have that chain where you start the starting fear and then the end fear is self-reliance failed me. No matter what kind of fear you have, it's just going to come into that chain somehow. Do you know what I'm talking about? The trail of fears, whatever fear you have, it's going to connect to that trail one way or another. Is anybody confused? Okay, I just want to make sure. I don't want to lose anybody. So basically, this is called the trail of fears, and you're just going to follow the fears until you get it down to your core fears for all of them. In the end fear is that self-reliance failed me. Again, if you run out of room, you can just get another piece of paper, make the columns, and start. From there. I personally, I only needed one sheet, but of course I only had a few fears, and I've done this before. My first time doing this, I know my first time doing this, I had about 150 fears, and I was able to bring it all the way down to I think 5 or 6. So I made up a new acronym for fear. I shared it with Sean. So the face everything and recover. You've heard that before, or F everything and run. You heard that before. Well, I got one for you. It's called false ego appearing real. False ego appearing real. Because that's what we've been dealing with. We've been talking a lot about this false ego, right? From the ego state, we really did a lot of work with that in the resentments. Okay, how's everybody doing with that? Can everybody see that you're reducing your fears? So here's the thing. When you're doing that chain, that trail of fears, once you hit a duplicate, you just got to cross it off. Once you hit duplicate, you just cross it off. So I know for me, at the end, I ended up with a whole bunch of self-reliance failed me. I just crossed them all off and ended up with one self-reliance that failed me instead of having 10. Once you get a copy of something, then you just cross it off. It's sort of like that line that you're following just kind of dies once you hit a copy anywhere. All right, I'm going to go back into the book. I'm going to go back to the top of page 68. And I'm just going to continue reading where we left off. Now, you can either follow along or you can finish writing. I'll give you the option over there. Um, it says right here, the next line says, wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? It's a question. I highlighted it in purple. The rest of the paragraph is all a warning. And then the 3 lines above that are all in a direction, so I got them in green. All right. Wasn't it because self-reliance failed me, failed us? What do you think that answer is going to be? Absolutely, absolutely failed me. It says self-reliance was good as far as it went, but it didn't go far enough. Some of us once had great self-confidence, but it didn't fully solve the fear problem or any other. When it made us cocky, it was worse. It was worse. You ever feel self-confident about something that you're doing, like a job? You feel really confident about it. You know what you're doing. You feel good. But somehow it doesn't solve the fear problem, even when I'm self-confident. Because that's what it says. Some of us once had great self-confidence, but it didn't fully solve the fear problem. Because even when I'm confident like that, I can still feel fear. Perhaps there is a better way. I absolutely love this because it's like, there's got to be a better way. There has to be a better way than the way that we've been living life. You think about the way I've been living life from the ego stand and creating all kinds of problems, imagining, creating things in my own mind, resentments against people, and I am just creating all kinds of drama, and I'm in collision with everything and everybody. But it didn't fully the same problem, didn't fully solve the fear problem or any other. You know, there has to be a better way. Again, I really want you to think about, you know, my whole problem has been self-will and the ego, and it's created me all kinds of problems. It's all about self, and I can't overcome self with self. So at this point, I'm kind of sitting here going, you know, there's got to be a better way. There has got to be a better way than the way I've been living my life. And it says, we think so. For we are now on a different basis. Go back to that third step. We're on a different basis now. It's the basis of trusting. I want you to circle that word, trusting and relying upon. So I want you to circle trusting, and I want you to circle rely upon. God. We got to learn to trust and rely upon that power, whatever that power is to you, whatever that power means to you, that power that we found in We Agnostics. That's the power. You're going to learn to trust and rely upon that power. Remember in there, it talked about accessing the power. It says we trust, again, circle the word trust, infinite God rather than finite selves. I'm going to learn to trust God and not trust myself in a sense anymore, because I just made a mess of everything. It says we're in the world to play the role that God assigns, not the role that I've been assigning myself when my self-esteem gets messed with, right? And all those roles that we went over in column 3 and column 4, those are all roles that you assigned yourself. Now we're in the world to play the role that God assigns us, right? Just to the extent that we do as we think he would have us. And humbly, I want you to circle the word rely on him. Humbly rely on him. Does he enable us to match calamity with serenity? Does he enable us? And I'm going to say, that sounds more like it would be a question, but I'm going to say yes. And what they're talking about here is in the midst of doom and gloom and calamity, I can still feel serene inside because I'm practicing emotional sobriety. No matter what's going on in my life, I can still feel peace and serenity inside, no matter what's going on. You ever see those people? You ever meet those people that they are just happy no matter what's going on in their life? They are always smiling and they're always like spewing off inspirational stuff. And you're like, man, I want to be like that guy or that woman, right? I know people like that. We all know people like that. You know, that's kind of what I want to be like. I want to be in the middle of the storm, calm and serene. So I'm thinking clearly. When I am not calm and serene in the middle of the storm, Let's just tap into a whole bunch of anxiety and let's just get everything all messed up because I'm not even thinking clearly. But when I'm peace and serene in the storm, I think clearly. And a lot of times the answer just comes and I can figure things out. It says we never, again, there's that word never. And I actually underlined it and then I wrote never in the margin. We never apologize to anyone for depending, circle the word depending, upon our creator. I'm never going to apologize for anyone for depending upon that power. We can laugh at those who think spirituality is the way of weakness. Paradoxically, it is the way of strength. So they're telling me spirituality is the way of strength. The verdict of the ages is that faith means courage. All men of faith have courage. They trust, circle that word trust, they trust their God. We never, there's that word never again, highlight that, I write it in the margin, never. We never apologize for God. That's like the second time it told us that we're not going to apologize for God. That's the second time. We never apologize for God. Instead, we let God demonstrate through us what God can do. Sounds like I'm asking God to kind of use me as a channel or a tool or something, right? And then we have a prayer. Again, the ego, fear comes from the ego. And the only way to kill the ego is with the prayer. And it says, we ask God, we ask him. It's capitalized, it means God, to remove our fear. I'm going to say, God, remove my fear and direct my attention to what you would have me be. And then it says, it don't say in a week or in a month or in a year. It says at once we commence to outgrow fear. At once. That means like immediately. That means like right now. I'm starting to outgrow the fear. It's pretty simple. Why am I outgrowing the fear? Is because I am growing spiritually. As long as I'm growing spiritually, I'm gonna outgrow the fear because it's like this. When I'm a little child and you ever like have clothes on and they just don't fit anymore, right? The shirt that you're wearing is just getting too small, right? You get to a point where you just outgrow your clothes as you're growing. Of course, I don't do that anymore, but I mean, as you're younger, right? You outgrow it because it doesn't fit. And that's exactly what happens with the fears. They just don't fit anymore, and you outgrow them because you're growing spiritually. All right, did everybody kind of reduce all your fears and get it down to a few core fears? And it's all going to come down to it's simple. When you do that trail of fears, you're going to end up at the end, self-reliance failed me. Self-reliance failed me. Again, we're going back to like that feeling I felt. For me, I felt that feeling like probably the end of the third column when I was looking at myself and getting all those fears. I was kind of feeling like I have really screwed myself. It talks about self-defeating self. And I just kept thinking, man, I really screwed myself. I didn't even know I'd been living, in the ego and just treating people from a delusional state, you know? The other thing I want to talk about there is when I'm in this delusional state, it doesn't matter what anyone does to me in column 2, whether it's fancied or real. It has the power to kill. It absolutely has the power to kill, you know? Um, man, I just love this stuff. I just love this stuff because it just gives me another. I always like to have things that I can work on. Inventory, inventory, inventory. It's all I hear all the time. Inventory, inventory, inventory. And then for me, I like to go through this process and have a deeper experience. When I have a deeper experience, I have a spiritual experience. And sometimes those spiritual experiences just absolutely change me. Absolutely change me. The whole point of doing this inventory is to find out what my true self is. Because I don't even know. When I do all this inventory, it don't look like it's too good, right? But don't worry, there's lots of good that's going to come out of this. All right. But I know for me, when I'm first looking at all this inventory and looking at all this, it's all negative. Right. And I kind of feel like I did all this to myself. I did it all, you know? One of the fears that I put on my fear list that I'm going to share with you was myself. I was afraid of finding, I was afraid of looking inside. I was afraid of what I was going to find in here. Because you have to understand, I come from a place where I didn't like myself, you know? And I hid secrets and I hid all kinds of things. I didn't like who I was, you know? I didn't like what I had become. So I was afraid, since I didn't like myself or afraid of what I had become, not that that's really who I am, but I always thought it was. What I become is sort of who I am on the inside. And I was just afraid to let anybody know, to show that to anybody. And I was afraid to look inside because I was afraid of what I was going to find. And I'm going to tell you that that's that false ego appearing real. Because when I finally looked inside, I really wasn't afraid of what I saw. I already knew it. I already knew. But the important thing for me to understand is that resentments and fear, it just said it even in resentments, it blocks us off from the sunlight of the spirit. It blocks me off from God. What blocks me off from God, not only does it block me off from God, but it blocks me off from you. And whatever blocks me off from you and me blocks me off from God. In the 1939 dictionary, the word sin, I don't particularly care for that word, but the word sin means anything that separates you from God. And I really like that definition. Way better than any other definition that I could come up with, like immoral or whatever. I like the word sin in that sense, and that definition is anything that separates me from God. And that could be resentment, that could be fear. But I want you to understand that we're all born with good qualities that are within us. And our parents try to teach us that, sharing, right? And lots of things like that. But somewhere along the line, I forget what my parents have taught me about sharing and caring and loving. And I go a completely different direction with that. I go a completely different direction. And I've been living my life so long on that until you all pointed out to me in that third column that I've been living this way and didn't even know. So since I'm in this delusional state in the column 3, and everything that, if I'm in this delusional state all the time in column 3, that means that it doesn't matter what anyone does to me in column 2, because column 2 is based on a lie from that delusional state. I'm going to get more into that when we do step 5. I just wanted to talk about that just a little bit right now. Just because I really love this stuff, and I really love the inventory here. This process is so simple. It just is. It's just simple. So all we did was copy page 65, exactly the way it is in that 3 column, write all the words out in that 3rd column. And then we went to page 66 and we read it down and it said, hey, we got to go back, look at the list again. And we did, because it holds the key to the future. That's how important. That's why we have to go back. That's why we don't attach a 4th column there. We never attach a 4th column, because I have to go back. How can I go back and look at the list and go look for the key if I got a 4th column right up to the 3rd column? It skips that page, you know? Anyway, and then I learned from that 3rd column that I was spiritually sick by living in that delusional state, you know? Okay, so again, the thing with the fears here, it's got a prayer. We ask God to remove our fear and direct his attention to what he would have us be. At once, we commence to outgrow fear. Now, it doesn't say in there that fear is going to go away and never come back. There we go. Looking for my notes I had written down. Yeah, notice the book doesn't say fear goes away and never comes back. It states that we outgrow fear. We outgrow fear because through prayer, we're asking God to direct us towards his will, to do his work, to do his bidding. It's that simple. And the miracle of it is that it works. As we learn to trust and rely and depend upon that power for strength, as we learn to trust and rely upon that power, as we're doing that, we're going to outgrow our fears as well. We're learning to trust and rely. The fears would just fall as you're growing spiritually. And then with faith comes courage to outgrow the fear. With faith comes courage. With faith comes courage, and the courage is to walk through the fear. And as we walk through it, you ever have something that you happen in your life and you just said, I don't think I can handle this. This is too much for me. And then you just get on the other side and you're like, that really wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. You see, that's one kind of like that. To me, that's the example where that fear falls from me. When I get on the other side, when I get the courage to walk through it, you know, and then I just find when I get the courage to walk through the fear, I get on the other side of it and I just completely outgrow it and it just disappears. Now, without God or without that power that we were talking about in We Agnostics, long as without that power, the power of God, I will continue to be afraid of those things in column 1 because self-reliance failed me. I'll read that one more time. Without God or the power of God, I will continue to be afraid of those things in column 1 because self-reliance failed me. All right. Is everybody good with fear so far? Remember, we got the only way to overcome the ego is with the prayer. That's why we got a prayer with the resentments and we got a prayer with the fear. I want you to take your fear inventory and I just want you to put it off to the side for a second. And I want to take a step back to the resentment inventory one more second. I want you to take the resentment inventory. I want you to take the 3 columns and put that in front of you. And I want you to put another 4th column that you had done right next to it. So you got, 1, 2, and 3, and 4. You got those 4 columns all in front of you. Let me know when everybody's got that done. Just give me a thumbs up. Yeah, we're just taking a look back here. What I'm going to do here is called the reverse fear inventory. But it has to come off of the resentment sheet. If you noticed in that last column, your inventory should prove that the first paragraph on page 62 is true. And that should come right off of your 4th column, that you're driven by 100 forms of fear. Self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity. That's all ego, right? Can you see that self-reliance failed you in your actions and reactions with your attitudes and delusions from that 4th column? And it failed to solve any fear problem. And then that drove, from that 4th column, that drove the selfish, self-centered difficulties stemming from your ego in that 3rd column, which that then fueled the resentment in column number 2. And then you always gave the power of that to the person in column 1 instead of giving it to God or the power of God or whatever it is that you believe in. I'll do that one more time. I can see in that 4th column how self-reliance failed me. I can see that self-reliance failed me in my actions, my self-seeking actions, in my selfish attitudes, in my delusion, my dishonest delusions, failed to solve any fear problem, and drove the selfish, self-centered ego in that 3rd column. Remember, driven by 100 forms of fear. It drove that selfish, self-centered ego in that 3rd column, which then fueled the resentment in column 2. And I gave the power of all of that to the person in column 1 instead of giving that power to God and turning that over. I want to say that at this point, I wrote it in my book. The key to forgiveness is serenity You remember that when in the fear prayer talked about serenity, right? So I want you to think the key to forgiveness is serenity. And I want you to think about this is the only way to overcome resentment is with forgiveness, right? That's the way it throws a prayer in here. But I want you to think about this one. I had this thought last night, and that's why I wanted to go back here. If the whole column 2 is based on a delusional state of being in column 3, right? I lost my train of thought. Oh yeah, there we go. So if column 2 is all based on a delusional state of being from column 3, doesn't it make it that much easier to forgive somebody in column 2? Because it's all based on a lie. It's it's that false sense of self that created that column 2, that came out of that column 2, you know? And I looked at it like, okay, so if I look at it, I've been living this way all my life, this ego state of being, and didn't even know it. No wonder why people treated me the way they did. No wonder why they treated me the way I did, because I would have treated myself the same way. I would have treated myself the same way. So no wonder why people treated me that way in column 2. That's my realization. No wonder why they were treating me that way. So guess what? When I come to that realization and I realize, well, that's why they were treating me this way, because I've been living this way, it makes it easier for me to forgive them for whatever they did to me in column 2. It makes it that much easier to forgive. And forgiveness is the key to serenity. I got to be free. To be free from that, I got to forgive. Now, it's real easy to forgive somebody. Again, let's go back to that column 2 for a second. It talks about there that we realize the people in column 2 who wronged us were perhaps spiritually sick. Now it makes it a bit for not being spiritually awakened. Again, how can I not forgive somebody for not being spiritually awake? Is that who am I not to forgive somebody? Is that coming from the ego that I can't forgive somebody? Seriously, right? That's coming from the ego that I cannot forgive. We're trying to live in a spiritual way of life. And in that spiritual way of life, that includes forgiving people that have wronged us, even if they were in the wrong. Even if they were even in the wrong. And I didn't do nothing to provoke any of that. Just in the wrong place at the wrong time. We can still let those things go and be free from that. So it no longer owns us. That doesn't mean you're not going to think about it, but it doesn't own you anymore. Okay, I've been on almost an hour. I'm gonna jump into sex inventory. All right. Let's we're gonna need a couple sheets of paper. Just give me just give me a couple of blank sheets of paper. All right. We're gonna go to the next line, page 68. Now about sex. Many of us need an overhauling there. Above all, we tried to be sensible on this question. I like to put these questions because there's going to be a whole bunch of questions that we're going to ask. We got to try to be sensible on. I just wrote, instead of this, I wrote these questions. It is easy to get way off track. Now think about it. Is it easy to get way off track when we talk about sex? I know when a bunch of guys gets together and we're talking about, well, we could just get way off into left field. It's way off track, right? Well, here we need to stay focused because is it really about sex or is it about your behavior and how you treat others? Because that's what we're going to look at. It ain't about the sex. We all know how to do that, you know? Here we find human opinions running to extremes. Observe extremes, perhaps. One set of voices cry that sex is a lust of our lower nature, the base necessity of procreation. Then we have the voices of who cry for sex and more sex, who bewail the institutions of marriage, who think that most of the troubles of the race are traceable to sex causes. They think we do not have enough of it, or it just isn't the right kind. They see its significance everywhere. One school would allow a man no flavor for his fare, and the other would all have us on a straight pepper diet. We want to stay out of this controversy. We do not want to be an arbiter of anyone's sex conduct. I wrote above our arbiter. I wrote judge because that's what it means. It means to judge somebody. So I just wrote, I do not want to be the judge of anyone's sex conduct. It says we all have sex problems. I used to think that I didn't have sex problems. Like, like I know how to do that. You know what I mean? I don't know if I was born with that knowledge, but you just know what to do. I didn't think I had any problems. But when I started looking at this in a different angle, I started to realize, ooh, wait a minute. It said we'd hardly be human if we didn't. It says we all have sex problems, and we'd hardly be human if we didn't. First question, what can we do about them? When I first answered that question with, I don't know, right? But what can we do about them? It says reviewed our conduct over the years past. Now, I want you to make like, I'm going to go 1, 2, 3. I want you to give me, I think we did 8 columns. Is that what we did with the Trail of Fears? Was it 8 columns? I think that's what we did. Can you give me another 8 column page? And then I'm going to give you the headings, what to put for each one. So just draw another page, do another 8 columns. If you think that you're going to have, a lot in here or something, then just make yourself 2 pages. Let me know when everybody's finished making 8 columns on a sheet of paper. Just give me a thumbs up. Doesn't have to be pretty. No one's going to grade your work. All right, I saw that, Gaynor. That was a thumbs up, right? So I do it this way just because it makes more sense. Again, we're not doing like a 3 column or a 4 column inventory. That's not what it's asking us here. It doesn't say even in the fears. The only time it said, reflect back on the fear was bracketed in the 3rd column, So we didn't do that. We just did more like a 2 column inventory for the fears, right? List of fears. Why do we have them? And it just came down because self-reliance failed us, right? Now we're getting into sex, and sex is just a bunch of questions that we're going to ask. So in column 1, it's going to be column 1. I want you to write, where had we been selfish? That's going to be the heading of column 1. Where had we been selfish? I'm going to give you column 2 here. Column 2 is where had you been dishonest? Now, you don't have to write where have, you could just put selfish, dishonest. You could write it like that if you know how to. So where had you been selfish is column 1. Where had you been dishonest is column 2. Column 3 is where were you inconsiderate? Column 4, whom did we hurt? Column 5 is going to be a little tricky because it's going to have jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness. It said, did we justifiably arouse jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? You got those 3 words in others. Did you create that in others? I like to create bitterness in others when I'm angry at them. I'm just sharing that with you that I like to create bitterness. I have, made someone jealous and suspicious. Okay, so was that 6 column? The next one is going to be, where were we at fault? You could put fault. And then the next column after that is, what should you have done instead? The answer to that one, what should I have done instead, is never ever going to be I shouldn't have got involved, because that was my easier cop-out way that I used to write all the time, and my sponsor got on me about that, but not writing that down, because that was a cop-out. He goes, you wanted a deeper, you want a deeper experience, you got to write about more than that. It said that, then the next line says, we got this all down on paper and looked at it. It doesn't say refer back to page 65 and do a 3 column inventory or a 4 column inventory. It says we got this all down on paper. We're talking about, again, we go back to page 68, and it says we tried to be sensible on these questions. So I want you to ask yourself, where had you been selfish? Conduct is what we're looking at, right? Where had you been selfish? Where had you been dishonest? Where were you inconsiderate? Whom did you hurt? Did we unjustifiably arouse jealousy, suspicion, bitterness? Where were we at fault? And what should we have done instead? We got this all down on paper and looked at it. You don't have to answer all those questions now, but I just want you to get started on this format. Again, we're going to do the same thing like we did resentments. I'll let you go and just work on it for the next week. If you have any questions at any time, man, hit me up on WhatsApp, hit me up on Messenger, just hit me up. All right. It says in this way, the way that we're going to answer these questions, in this way we tried to shape a sane, I want you to underline the word sane and sound idea of our future sex life. Well, I know what I was thinking about when I first read this. I know exactly what I was thinking about. All right, I'm going to come up with this perfect woman, right? Sane and sound idea of my future sex life. I'm going to come up with this perfect, right? And it says, then we got another question that we're going to add to that inventory. I don't know what number we're at now, but you got another question. And the question is going to be, we subjected each relation to the test. Was it selfish or not? And I'm going to tell you on all of mine, I checked it was selfish on all of them. Okay. Again, that's a question. I highlighted it in purple. Now we have a prayer. We ask God to mold our ideals. Again, I got to do this in meditation. I'm asking God to mold my ideals and help me to live up to them. So help us to live up to them. We remembered always that our sex powers were God-given and therefore good, neither to be used lightly or selfishly, nor to be despised or loathed. Whatever our ideal turns out to be, we must, there's that word must, be willing to grow toward it. It's giving me some ideas here, right? I got to grow toward it. I must, there's that word must again, be willing to make amends where I've done harm, provided that, and then we have a warning. We do not bring about still more harm in doing so. We're already talking, here we are at the sex inventory, and we're already talking about step 9, making amends, aren't we? It says, in other words, we treat sex as we would any other problem. And what does it say? The next word, in meditation. So that's telling me any other problem that I have, I take it to meditation. It says we treat sex. What is it? In other words, we treat sex as we would any other problem in meditation. So that's telling me when I have problems, I take my problems into meditation to get the answer. We're living a spiritual way of life. Man, it's inventory and meditation, right? In meditation, again, I got another prayer. We ask God what we should do about each specific matter. And trust me, if you're real specific with God, what do? I meet somebody. I don't know what to do, right? God, what do I do? The right answer will come if we want it. The right answer will come in meditation if I want it. That's the second prayer so far for this sex inventory. It said God alone can judge our sex situation. That's the second time that it told me not to judge. Right? We don't want to be the arbiter of anyone's sex conduct. Now it's saying only God alone can judge our sex situation. Now it says counsel with friends, with persons are often desirable. I used to go to my friends all the time. I used to say, I learned everything I needed to learn about sex when I was in like grade school, and I learned it all from like a bunch of 13 and 14-year-olds when I was about 10. You know, I learned everything that I needed to know, and none of it was any good. All it did was create problems for myself. But you see, that's what happens when I look up to people like that, right? You know, it says, but I like in there, it says we all have sex problems. We hardly be human if we didn't, right? It says here, but we let God be the final judge. That's the third time that it told me that I'm not going to judge somebody's conduct. We realize some people are fanatical about sex as others are loose. I think I lost my page. Hit the book. And I completely lost my page. All right. It says, and what that, I used to think, what does it mean by that? We realize that some people are fanatical about sex as others loose. And what the loose means lacking moral judgment. Whatever you think that means in your own mind, it means lacking moral judgment or integrity. You can even put sexually promiscuous if you wanted to. It says we avoid hysterical thinking or advice. Now we got two questions. And then we got to add those into the inventory. So the first question, suppose we fall short of our chosen ideal and stumble. I got this chosen ideal and I fall short of it. Does this mean we are going to get drunk? Well, that's a big one. That's a big one. I'm going to tell you right here, relationships are probably the number one reason why people relapse. That's just from my own experience being sober as long as I have and just being with sponsees and just seeing what I've seen. I think a majority of it, of a relapse, is over relationships. That's why it's important that we really got to get this right and draw up an ideal. Now, ideal, that doesn't matter whether you're married or not. It's an ideal, okay, that you're going to grow and become. I used to always think I'm got to go out and I'm searching for this perfect woman. You see, I got to drop this ideal. I already know what I got in my mind, what I'm looking for. Okay. Now, I'm thinking that this mind, I'm going to draw up this perfect woman that I don't even know what she looks like, but I'm just going to draw this thing up of what she looks like, and she's going to be like perfect. But then my sponsor said, wrong, just like that, wrong. That's not what we're doing. And I'm like, what? But that's kind of what it says, doesn't it? And he's like, no, you're writing about what you want to find in somebody, what you know, qualities that you're looking for, that you grow into. It's not about finding the perfect person. It's about you growing into that person that you're looking for. You become what you're looking for. You grow into it spiritually. It says we grow into that. It's something that you grow into. You're going to take this into meditation and you're going to mold that idea with God. Whatever it turns out to be, you're going to mold it in meditation with God. And you're going to revisit it from time to time. It's what you're going to become. It says some people tell us so, but this is only half truth. It depends on us and our motives. If we are sorry for what we have done and have the honest desire to let God take us to better things, we believe we will be forgiven and we will have learned a lesson. Now, I want you to think about that for a second. God's going to forgive me. I'm going to learn a lesson, right? But if we are not sorry and our conduct continues to harm others, we are quite sure to drink. If I don't change, that's the way I look at this, man. If I don't change, the same person's going to drink again. I got to change. We are not theorizing. These are facts out of our experience. Now, I'm going to put something in there, and these are facts out of my experience because I've relapsed before, out of my experience. That's why I got to get this right because I know about screwing this all up and not getting this right. To sum up about sex, now we got another prayer. We earnestly pray for the right ideal, for guidance in each questionable situation, for sanity, and for the strength to do the right thing. Now it's giving me more direction. It says, if sex is very troublesome, we throw ourselves harder into helping others. What? It's telling me if sex is very troublesome, I need to go work with others, even though I am only on step 4. Helping others, helping others. I cannot hammer this in enough, right? I think it was in their solution. It says, as the ex-problem drinkers, our very lives depend upon the constant thought of others and how we may best meet their needs. It depends upon it. My life depends upon me working with others and carrying this message. That's telling me right here, if sex is very troublesome, we throw ourselves harder in helping others. We think of their needs and work for them. This takes us out of ourselves, which is the problem. This takes me right out of the problem, which is me. When I'm working with others, I am not in the problem. It says it quiets the imperial urge when the yield would mean heartache. So the solution, if sex is very troublesome, the solution is to go work with others. That's always going to be the solution. Go work with others. Get out of self. If we have been thorough about our personal inventory, we have written down a lot. Have you all written down a lot? We have listed and analyzed our resentments. Did we list and analyze those resentments? And we break it all down in the third and fourth column. We broke it down as much as you could, right? We began to see and comprehend their futility, their uselessness, and their fatality, deadliness. We begin to commence to see their terrible destructiveness. We begin to learn tolerance, patience. Remember, tolerance, patience comes from that prayer. And then you remember all those good qualities that we had on page, I think we went over them. They were on page 62, 61. They were on 61. Remember those assets, the virtuous, being virtuous, kind, considerate, patient, generous, modest, self-sacrificing, gracious. And then we added two more in for the prayer, which was going to be tolerance and patience. We already have those in us. Once the resentment is removed and the fear is removed, all those good qualities that are already a part of us can come to the surface and we become our true self. Grow and become our true self. We learn patience, tolerance, and goodwill toward men, even our enemies, for we look upon them as sick people. Remember, we went over that resentments with the prayer, right? Sick people. We pray for them. We pray for people that are sick. We have listed the people we have hurt by our conduct, which we just did in that sex conduct, and are willing to straighten out the past if we can. In this book, you read again and again that faith did for us. Faith did for us what we could not do for ourselves. We hope you are convinced now that God can remove whatever self-will has been blocking you off from him. So our whole inventory was all about self-will. That was all about all the resentments and fears and sex. All of that was all about self-will. God can remove whatever self-will has blocking you off from him. If you have already made a decision, step 3, and an inventory of your gross or handicap, step 4, you have made a good beginning. And that being so, you have swallowed and digested some big chunks of truth about yourself. I was really focusing on all the self-will, you know. Self-will has produced the state of being, the ego state, or the false identities, persona, which have their own imagined needs, their own belief systems. We're talking about the ego state with all the different characters, right? And their own desires, which must be met if they are to exist or to be. Those states of being are so concerned with self-preservation and self-gratification that they will drive the alcoholic into selfish and self-seeking behaviors. Such is the case when one does not know his real self, but imagines that his false self and phony persona define who he is. Self-transformation will manifest when the false identities are abandoned and the true self come into consciousness. These behaviors then place the alcoholic at odds with all people and with all events which do not satisfy the self-will of each particular self state of being, such as the state of being a spouse or the state of being an employee. If the alcoholic cannot face the fact that these phony states of being exist, and if he cannot take the action necessary to rid himself of these false identities, then he will drink, live miserably, or kill himself. And I'm going to tell you, I know what it's like to be miserable in the room, being sober, suffering from the ego. Thus, these states of being have the ability to kill. It is in the writing of step 4. It's in the writing of step 4, in the taking of the 5th step, that one begins to pull free from these states of being and begin to find out who he is not. Isn't that what we found out? Who we are not? And then one can begin to experience oneness. That is, the person can begin to find out who he or she really is, their true self. In transforming from the dual or multiple personalities to knowing the one true self, the sense of being torn or split or shattered into a million tiny pieces just disappears. The person can begin to transform from living in the delusion of being driven by false identities and begin to exercise the free will that comes when one knows his true self. This is the process that I call self transformation. The alcoholic transforms by accepting many false selves and states of being or ego state as his identity and shifts into his state. Give me a second. And shifts into a state of consciousness in which he or she becomes aware of the real self. Being awake, aware, and conscious is being awake to one's real identity, aware of who one really is, conscious of one's true identity, and no longer living in the schizophrenic state of multiple but false identities. That really just blew me away. A lot of that stuff, I'm schizophrenia. I mean, all of it makes sense when I start to realize all these different characters I've been playing, all these different roles I've been playing, you know? Now, can you see why the fifth step is a life and death matter? And I'm going to read that next week. We'll do step 5 next week. Okay. But I hope everyone finishes with finish up with your sex inventory. But can you see that it's a life and death matter? It's no, my power just came on. It's not just that it's a step necessary in the process of assuring that you'll never drink again and thereby avoiding death. It's much more than that. It's the death of who you are not, namely the person or the persona with self-will running riot in the life of who you really are. You now see how in this program we get to recreate our lives. We die the death of self-will and begin to recreate a new life along the lines of God's will. And along those lines, we can do anything. You can experience happiness, you can experience joy, you can experience freedom, and you can experience the true sense of oneness of your true self. I wanted to end it with that because that's what we discovered. When I start to see all these bad things about myself and self-will, I learn to start to let go of that false sense of self. And when I let go of that, that's when, again, when the blocks are removed, the good qualities in me can grow to the surface and I can grow into my true self, that the man that I'm supposed to be, or the woman that you're supposed to grow into, you know? It's all good. It's all growing experience from here on in. You know what I mean? Okay, so next week, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do step 5 with resentments and fears and sex. So I'm going to record it because I'm just going to do it the same way I would do with the sponsee and how I would break it all down. Now, I've already given you probably a lot of information that I'll probably go over again next week anyway. Please take the time to finish your all inventories and try to have it all done by next week. So when I do step 5, you can actually be free. That how does that I was writing something down the other day and I don't know, I wanted to share it. Related to on how I live a spiritual program. If I'm living the spiritual program and I'm being disciplined in steps 10 and 11, all direct relation. The ego is going to come back on how I'm living this spiritual way of life. If I'm staying on that path and I'm staying true to that path, then the ego is only going to show up in very, and that's why we have to just do inventory so we can catch those little bits of the ego coming in. That's why step 10 is there. Inventory, inventory, inventory all throughout the day. I'm just keep looking for that ego, I want to thank you all for being here and helping me stay sober and being part of this workshop. And I hope that you all leave here with something. What I'm going to do here is let's have Another moment of silence for the still sick and suffering alcoholic. I'm going to close this with the Serenity Prayer. And then once I shut off the recording, if anybody's comments or anything, just let me know. So, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change and the courage to change the things I can and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen.